Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to be taking a quick look at the Z-mount 14-24 f2.8 and talking about why it has three different lens hoods. Okay, so Nikon just announced the new 14-24 2.8 alongside the 50mm f1.2. Now, in this video, we're just going to be talking about the 14-24. I'll do another video about the 50mm 1.2 shortly. So the first thing you'll notice about this Z 14-24 2.8 is that it's size and weight. Now, size-wise, it's very similar to the Z-mount 24-70 2.8. They sit quite nicely next to each other. And then in terms of weight-wise, it's even lighter than that lens as well. So it only weighs 650 grams, which for an extreme wide angle and an f2.8 lens is really quite lightweight. I first picked it up and I thought, oh, actually this is noticeably lighter. So much so that my original thought process was that I love the 14-30, and that offers me something that's a little bit more lightweight and a little bit smaller. And I felt like the 14-30 would always be my go-to wide-angle lens, because I just expected that this 14-24 would be a lot heavier. It might not have been massive, but it would have been a lot heavier just because of all the required glass. So to actually have a 14-24 that's actually a reasonable weight is actually quite exciting. The design of the lens itself is very similar to what we've seen with like the 24-70 2.8 and also Nikon's other S-series, Pro series lenses. So they each have a lens function button, they each have an OLED display to give you information around about your focal length and also about your focusing distances. This 14-24 does not have built-in VR, so it is relying on the in-body stabilization system when paired with a Z6, Z7 or a Z5. You can obviously use this lens on a Z50, but a Z50 doesn't have the built-in in-body stabilization system, so that setup would not be stabilized. So as I mentioned in the intro, the lens actually has three different lens hoods. Only two of them are removable though, and they each do a different job. So the first one isn't really a lens hood, but it kind of looks like there's been a hood that's cut into the front of the lens. This is not removable, it's always going to be there on the lens. And the function of this doesn't really add anything to the lens. There's no filter thread or anything like that. You'll then have a normal everyday removable lens hood, which is a HB96. This again does not have any filter thread or anything like that, and it is a slightly smaller lens hood as well, but it attaches and clicks onto the front of the lens. And then you have the HB97. This is the bigger lens hood that you can attach to the lens, and this is the lens hood that has the 112mm filter thread in it. So if you are wanting to use this lens with 112mm filters, it has to be with this lens hood attached. You cannot attach those filters without this lens hood. One of the main problems of that is that obviously with the lens hood, it will only allow you to attach circular filters. You couldn't use a filter holder or something like that because the actual hood itself is going to get in the way. With those different hoods, the lens also comes with two different caps. You'll get a normal size lens cap, but it has two little teeth cut into the side of it that fit nicely into the side of the 14-24, which does mean that you can't use it on any other lens. It only fits on your 14-24. And then you'll also get what I've discovered to be one of the biggest plastic lens caps I've ever seen. And this will fit on top of the larger hood that will take the 112mm filters. So if you want that hood to be attached and you want a larger cap that goes over your filter and the front of your lens, this is where you need to use that larger cap, and it is quite chunky. Also add gel filters to the back of the lens. So the back of the lens will have a square insert where you can slot pre-cut gel filters into the back of the lens if you want to. From a landscape point of view, it's going to be those polarizer filters. It's going to be those variable ND filters for video that you're mainly going to be using on that 112mm thread built into the lens hood. Now, when it comes to the f-mount 14-24, I used that lens for about 5 years, and I loved that f-mount 14-24. I even fell down a mine whilst I had it in my hands. So we've been through a lot with that lens, but I did decide to start shooting with the 14-30, and one of the main reasons for that was that I wanted to use 100mm filters again instead of using the larger 150mm filter set that you have to use if you want to use them on the 14-24. Now, my problem is that I use square slot-in filters, and I cannot attach that holder, even the bigger 150mm holder set that I use on my 14-24 2.8 mount, I cannot attach that to this lens. What it's going to require is a specifically designed holder, the same way that you did with the f-mount 14-24. Albeit that the holder will be much smaller, it's obviously going to be up to the filter manufacturers themselves, like Lee or Nissi, to manufacture a holder that's going to fit on this lens. Now, to give you guys an idea, this is my Nissi V6 holder, and what would normally happen is this would attach to a ring that would screw into the front of my lens. So I would often have this holder and then a ring that screws into the front of my 14-30, and that would be an 82mm ring, obviously with that 14-30 lens. Now, the 14-24 does fit inside that holder, which means in theory we could possibly have some sort of attachment that slides onto the front of the lens, and then I can then attach this holder to the front of my 14-24. I obviously don't know what that means for things like vignetting, I'm just speculating. What I decided to do was try and record the viewfinder whilst holding the filter holder in front of my camera lens with a filter in it, and that way you could then see if we could actually see the holder in the frame. So as you can see, when I move the holder in front of the camera, even at 14mm, we can just get away with it. So we can just make sure that the holder is not in the frame, and the holder does have a filter in it as well, so it's not like I'm just moving the holder behind the lens. So I do honestly believe that we could get a holder setup for this lens that will allow you to use 100mm filters, and if that's the case, that's going to be a fantastic solution, which I'm pretty excited about. This is the 82mm ring that I would normally screw onto my 14-30, and that 82mm ring will not fit over the front of the lens. So it is going to either need a thinner, larger ring adapter or slight adjustment to be able to slide a ring over the front of the lens that I can then attach this holder to. So without that, unfortunately, we cannot attach a filter holder to this without an adapted holder, like we had to do with the f-mount 14-24 2.8 as well. And that's what's going to allow us to use square filters, so I can use a graduated filter or an ND filter like I do in my normal everyday filter set. I think one of my biggest concerns with this 14-24 is actually that the 14-30 already exists. And that 14-30, especially if we're looking at this from a landscape point of view, offers something that's smaller, lighter, and really the extra brightness that you'll get from the f2.8 from like a landscape photographer's point of view isn't really necessary. I'm going to do some further testing, because the one thing that's got me really interested is actually the weight of this. I was expecting it to be much heavier, and the fact that it's much lighter means that I'm actually more likely to carry this and take this with me over the 14-30, especially if the picture quality is as good as it looks right now. So I am going to do some further tests, obviously directly compare it against the 14-30, center sharpness, corner sharpness, and so on. But I think for a lot of photographers out there, those of you that are interested in architecture, landscape, and you know, you're shooting on a Z6, a Z7, and you want something that's smaller, lightweight, the 14-30 already does a really, really good job. But for those of you that want the best picture quality, obviously the 14-24 is going to allow you to do that. I'll try and show you the differences between those two lenses as much as I can with the upcoming videos and the tests that I'll do on this lens. That I'm more interested than in the 14-24 after seeing it and holding it than I thought I ever would be. Obviously this 14-24 also completes the Z-mount holy trinity of lenses, or what people like to call as, you know, the three most important lenses from a photographer's point of view. So we obviously have now the Z-mount 14-24 2.8, the Z-mount 24-70 2.8, and we had to wait a little bit of a while, but the Z-mount 70-200 2.8, so we complete that holy trinity of lenses. And one thing that I'll say is that it is quite clearly the best collection of holy trinity lenses that you can get, and also I kind of have a suspicion that this is going to be the sharpest 14-24 that you can buy as well. So it does mean that Nikon's Z system holy trinity of lenses, at least, are the best performing series of lenses that you can buy. That's kind of the feeling that I'm gathering, and there's also other people that I've seen that have mentioned that as well. So I do think that this is going to be a really strong collection of lenses going forward. So it means that we kind of have that pro setup of lenses ready to go. I am pleasantly surprised. I was fully prepared to say, you know what, I'll keep my 14 to 30 because it means I can, keep the same setup, use the same filters. But I could start to maybe reconsider that, especially when some of the filter manufacturers come out with a holder for this. That's going to be really interesting. Right now, I've never really been a fan of screw-in filters for my landscape photography. I've always preferred to use a filter holder with square filters. So we'll see how that goes. And I'll update you guys on that as well. But as always, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. It's always appreciated. And if you've got any questions about this lens in particular, then let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.